Have you ever wanted to learn a new language, pick up a musical instrument, or figure out how to code, but you stopped yourself before you even started because you felt like you simply did not have the time? We all have a list of things we wish we could do. We want to be the kind of person who can pull out a guitar at a bonfire, speak conversational Italian on vacation, or build our own website from scratch. But when we look at the reality of our busy lives, the idea of acquiring a completely new skill feels impossible. We are intimidated by the sheer mountain of effort it seems to require. This feeling of intimidation is not entirely our fault. For years, popular culture has peddled a highly specific and highly discouraging idea about what it takes to get good at something. You have probably heard of the 10,000-hour rule. Popularized by Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers, the 10,000-hour rule states that it takes 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to master a complex skill. That is a full-time job for 5 years. When we hear that number, our brains automatically shut down. We think, I do not have 10,000 hours to learn how to play the piano, so why even try? But there is a massive misunderstanding hidden inside that rule. The 10,000 hours rule is based on the research of Dr. K. Anders Ericsson, who studied elite performance. He was looking at professional athletes, world-class musicians, and chess grandmasters. He was studying what it takes to get to the absolute top of a highly competitive field. But here's the thing. You probably do not want to be a chess grandmaster, and you are likely not trying to play the violin at Carnegie Hall. You just want to be good enough to enjoy the skill, to achieve a personal goal, or to add a useful tool to your professional belt. You're not aiming for global mastery. You're aiming for competence. And the journey from knowing absolutely nothing to being noticeably competent does not take 10,000 hours. According to Josh Kaufman, author of the book The First 20 Hours, How to Learn Anything Fast, it only takes 20 hours. That's just 45 minutes a day for about a month. In 20 hours, you can break through the barrier of initial incompetence and reach a level where you're actually having fun and seeing real results. Today, we're going to dive deep into Kaufman's revolutionary framework. We'll explore the psychology of learning, the vital difference between learning and practicing, and the exact step-by-step principles you can use to deconstruct any skill and master the basics in just 20 hours. To understand why the first 20 hours are so magical, we first have to understand the learning curve. If you were to graph your progress when learning something new, it does not look like a straight, steady line angled upward. Instead, it looks like a hockey stick. When you start, you know nothing, and your performance is terrible. But as you begin to grasp the fundamental concepts, your progress skyrockets. You experience rapid, massive improvements in a very short amount of time. This steep vertical climb happens right at the beginning of the learning process. As you get better, the curve flattens out. To go from being in the top 5% of the world to the top 1% might take thousands of hours of agonizing practice, but going from zero to being pretty decent takes almost no time at all. So why do we struggle so much to start? Kaufman argues that the greatest barrier to learning a new skill is not intellectual, it is emotional. It is called the frustration barrier. When we try something new, we are acutely aware of how bad we are at it. We feel stupid, clumsy, and awkward. Human beings absolutely hate feeling stupid. Our natural instinct is to quit immediately and go back to doing things we are already good at. The 20-hour rule is not just about time management. It is a psychological contract you make with yourself. If you pre-commit to pushing through exactly 20 hours of deliberate practice, you give yourself permission to be bad. You endure the frustration barrier long enough to reap the rewards of that steep learning curve. But putting in 20 hours of mindless repetition will not get you anywhere. You have to practice intelligently. Kaufman breaks this down into two distinct phases: rapid skill acquisition and effective learning. Let us thoroughly unpack the 10 principles of rapid skill acquisition. These are the actionable steps you must take to physically practice your new skill. The very first principle is to choose a lovable project. We often try to learn things because we feel like we should, not because we genuinely want to. You might tell yourself you need to learn Excel macros for work, but if you don't actually care about the outcome, your motivation will plummet the moment it gets difficult. You must pick a project that you are deeply passionate about. The more excited you are about the end result, the faster you will learn, because that excitement will be the fuel that pushes you through the frustration barrier. If you want to learn programming, do not just read a textbook on Python. Set a goal to build a specific app or a simple video game that you personally want to exist. The second principle is to focus your energy on one skill at a time. In our modern world, we love the idea of multitasking. We want to learn Spanish, guitar, and graphic design all in the same month. This is a recipe for complete failure. Skill acquisition requires intense, concentrated focus. When you divide your attention, you dilute your progress. If you give 3 skills 33% of your focus, you will not cross the frustration barrier in any of them, and you will end up quitting all 3. Pick one skill, make it your absolute priority, and put all your other interests on a temporary waiting list until you have hit your 20-hour mark on the first one. Once you've chosen your single lovable project, you must apply the third principle. Define your target performance level. What does good enough look like to you? Be as specific as possible. If you want to learn the ukulele, your target performance level should not be learn to play the ukulele. That is too vague. A better target is, I want to be able to play 4 specific pop songs smoothly without stopping to look at my fingers so I can play them for my friends. Defining this target gives you a clear finish line. It tells you exactly what you need to practice, and more importantly, what you can safely ignore. You do not need to learn complex finger-picking techniques if your only goal is to strum chords at a party. The lower you set your initial target performance level, the faster you will reach it, and reaching that milestone will give you the confidence to set a higher target later. This leads directly into the fourth and perhaps crucial principle. Deconstruct the skill into sub-skills. Most of the things we consider to be single skills are actually bundles of smaller sub-skills. Tennis is not one skill. It is serving, hitting forehands, hitting backhands, footwork, and reading the opponent. If you try to learn all of tennis at once, you will be overwhelmed. You have to break the skill down into its smallest possible components. Once you have chopped the skill into tiny pieces, you can look at them and ask, which of these sub-skills are the most important? Which ones will help me reach my target performance level the fastest? In any skill, there are always a few core components that deliver the vast majority of the results. This is the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule, applied to learning. By identifying and practicing the most critical sub-skills first, your progress will explode. Principle 5 is about logistics. Obtain the necessary tools. You cannot practice efficiently if you are fighting your equipment. If you are learning to play tennis, you need a decent racket and access to a court. If you are learning photography, you need a camera that allows manual control. However, Kaufman warns against the trap of procrastination by preparation. This is when we spend weeks researching the absolute best, most expensive equipment instead of actually practicing. Get the fundamental tools you need to do the job, and then stop shopping and start practicing. Principle 6 is highly related. Eliminate barriers to practice. Think about all the things that stop you from sitting down to practice. These barriers can be physical, mental, or emotional. A physical barrier might be keeping your guitar zipped up in its case in the back of your closet. If you have to spend 5 minutes digging it out and setting it up every time you want to play, you will never practice. Leave the guitar out on a stand in the middle of your living room. Make it harder to ignore than it is to pick up. Mental barriers are distractions like your phone, the television, or the internet. When it is time to practice, turn your phone off and put it in another room. Eliminate the friction between you and the act of practicing, and you will dramatically increase your chances of putting in the work. Principle 7 requires a shift in how you view your schedule. Make dedicated time for practice. One of the biggest lies we tell ourselves is, I will practice when I find the time. You will never find the time. Time is not lost under the couch cushions. It is actively consumed by your daily life.
If you want to learn a skill, you must deliberately create time for it. Kaufman recommends carving out at least 90 minutes a day, but even if you can only manage 45 minutes, that is enough to see results. The key is to pre-commit. Look at your schedule, block out the time, and treat it as a non-negotiable appointment with yourself. You may have to cut back on watching television or scrolling through social media to make this happen, but that temporary sacrifice is the price of acquiring a lifelong skill.
As you begin to practice, you must utilize Principle 8. Create fast feedback loops. Feedback is information about how well you are performing. If you do not know you are making a mistake, you cannot fix it, and you will end up burning your 20 hours perfectly practicing the wrong technique. Fast feedback loops tell you immediately when you are doing something incorrectly. This could mean hiring a coach or a tutor, but it does not have to be that expensive. If you are learning to code, the computer provides an instant feedback loop. If the code is wrong, the program will not run. If you are learning a physical skill, set up your smartphone and record a video of yourself. Watching yourself perform gives you objective, immediate feedback that you simply cannot get while you are in the moment. The faster you can get feedback, the faster you can adjust, and the faster you will learn. Principle 9 is crucial for managing the mental strain of learning. Practice by the clock in short bursts. When you are pushing through the frustration barrier, your brain will try every trick in the book to make you stop. You will suddenly remember an email you need to send, or you will feel an overwhelming urge to clean the kitchen. To combat this, do not rely on your willpower. Rely on a timer. Set a countdown timer for 20 minutes and commit to practicing intensely with absolutely no distractions until the alarm goes off. Once you start the timer, you are not allowed to do anything else. You will be amazed at how much high-quality practice you can fit in 20 focused minutes. String a few of those bursts together every day, and your 20 hours will fly by. Finally, the 10th principle of skill acquisition: emphasize quantity and speed. When we start learning something new, our perfectionism often kicks in. We want our first painting to be a masterpiece. We want our first line of code to be elegant. This is a massive mistake. Perfectionism is the enemy of rapid learning. In the first 20 hours, your goal should be to produce as much as possible as quickly as possible. Do not worry about whether your guitar playing sounds beautiful. Worry about whether your fingers are moving to the right chords fast enough. Do not worry about writing perfect grammar in a new language. Just try to communicate as many raw ideas as you can. Quality naturally emerges from quantity. The faster and more frequently you practice, the more quickly you will smooth out the rough edges and develop genuine competence. Those 10 steps cover the physical act of practice, but what about the cognitive side? How do you prime your brain to absorb all this new information? This brings us to Kaufman's 10 principles of effective learning, which run parallel to the physical practice. The first learning principle is to research the skill and related topics. Before you start practicing, spend a brief amount of time reading books, watching tutorial videos, or skimming articles about your chosen skill. But remember the warning from earlier: do not get trapped in research. Your goal here is not to understand everything. Your goal is simply to collect enough information to identify the most important sub-skills and figure out what tools you need. Kaufman suggests skimming 3 to 5 different resources. If all 5 resources mention the same fundamental concepts, you know exactly what you need to focus on first. The second learning principle is counterintuitive: jump in over your head. When you first start researching a skill, you are going to encounter a wall of jargon and concepts that make absolutely no sense to you. That is a good thing. Do not get discouraged by the confusion. Embrace it. Confusion is the natural first step toward understanding. By exposing yourself to the complex, overwhelming totality of the skill right away, you begin to recognize patterns. As you practice, the things that initially made no sense will slowly start to click into place. The third principle is to identify mental models and mental hooks. A mental model is a fundamental concept that helps you understand how a system works. For example, if you were learning about computer networking,
Understanding the mental model of a server and a client makes learning the specific technical details much easier. A mental hook is an analogy or a metaphor that connects a new concept to something you already understand. If you can relate a complex new idea in physics to the way water flows through a pipe, your brain will latch onto the new information much faster. Actively look for these models and hooks during your initial research.
Principle 4 is incredibly powerful. Imagine the opposite of what you want. This is a problem-solving technique known as inversion. If your goal is to learn how to paddleboard without falling into the water, ask yourself, what would I have to do to guarantee that I fall into the water immediately? You would probably stand with your feet too close together, look straight down at your feet instead of at the horizon, and lock your knees. By defining exactly what causes failure, you automatically create a checklist of things to avoid. Inversion highlights the most critical errors so you can consciously correct them before they become bad habits. The fifth learning principle is to talk to practitioners to set expectations. One of the main reasons we get discouraged and quit is because our expectations are completely detached from reality. We think we should be able to speak fluent French after 2 weeks of using an app. Find someone who is already good at the skill you want to learn and ask them what the beginning stages were like for them. Ask them what the most common pitfalls are and how long it reasonably took them to see progress. Calibrating your expectations against the reality of experienced practitioners will protect you from unnecessary disappointment and help you survive the frustration barrier.
Principle 6 is to eliminate distractions in your environment. We touched on this during the skill acquisition phase, but it applies equally to the cognitive learning phase. Your environment shapes your behavior. If your desk is cluttered, if your room is loud, or if your browser has 50 tabs open, your brain is expending precious cognitive energy just filtering out the noise. When you sit down to learn, ruthlessly curate your environment. Create a quiet, clean, and dedicated space that signals to your brain that it is time to focus. Principle 7 is essential if your skill requires memorization. Use spaced repetition and reinforcement. If you are learning a language, biology, or the rules of a complex game, you have to memorize facts. But reading a list of words over and over again is incredibly inefficient. The human brain is designed to forget things it does not use. Spaced repetition hacks this biological reality. It is a technique where you review information at systematically increasing intervals. You learn a word, review it a minute later, then 10 minutes later, then a day later, then a week later. Each time you recall the information just as you are about to forget it, the memory becomes stronger. Using digital flashcard apps that utilize spaced repetition algorithms is the fastest way to upload raw data into your long-term memory. The eighth principle is to create scaffolds and checklists. When you are learning something new, your working memory is constantly overloaded. You are trying to remember a dozen different steps at once, which leads to mistakes and frustration. You can relieve this cognitive burden by creating checklists. If you are learning to set up a camping tent, write down the exact sequence of steps on a piece of paper. Instead of trying to hold the entire process in your head, you can just follow the list. Scaffolds are similar. They are temporary structures that help you perform the skill before you fully understand it. Using a cheat sheet with guitar chords printed on it is a scaffold. You rely on it heavily at first and naturally discard it as the knowledge becomes internalized. Principle 9 is to make and test predictions. Learning is fundamentally about updating your understanding of the world. The best way to do this is to constantly form hypotheses and test them. If you are learning to bake bread, make a prediction before you put the dough in the oven. Because I let it rise for an extra hour, I predict the bread will be much airier than last time. When the bread comes out, test your prediction against reality. If you are wrong, you now have a specific piece of feedback that will improve your understanding of yeast and gluten. Treating practice as a series of experiments makes the learning process dynamic and deeply engaging.
The 10th and final learning principle is the most basic, yet the most frequently ignored. Honor your biology. Your brain is a physical organ. It runs on glucose, water, and sleep. If you try to learn a complex new skill while you are severely sleep-deprived, dehydrated, or hungry, you are wasting your time. Your brain simply cannot form new neural connections efficiently under those conditions. The absolute best thing you can do for your learning speed is to get 8 hours of high-quality sleep every single night. Sleep is when your brain consolidates the information you practice during the day. Practice is the stimulus. Sleep is the actual learning.
To truly understand how powerful these 20 principles are when combined, we can look at how Josh Kaufman applied them to his own life. One of the most striking examples from the book is his journey to learn the ukulele. Kaufman had zero background in playing stringed instruments. He could have hired a teacher, bought a stack of sheet music, and spent months learning musical theory. Instead, he defined his target performance level. He just wanted to be able to play pop songs and sing along at conferences or parties. He researched the instrument and quickly discovered a massive shortcut. The vast majority of popular music from the last 50 years is built on the exact same 4-chord progression. If you can quickly transition between the G, C, D, and E minor chords, you can play thousands of songs. He deconstructed the skill. He did not need to learn sheet music. He did not need to learn complex melodies. He only needed to learn how to fret those 4 specific chords and how to maintain a basic strumming rhythm. He obtained a decent, affordable ukulele, eliminated distractions, and used a timer to practice in short bursts. His practice consisted solely of moving his fingers between those 4 chords as fast as he could, emphasizing quantity and speed. Within a matter of hours, he had completely broken through the frustration barrier. Before he had even reached the 20-hour mark, he was able to seamlessly play an entire medley of famous pop songs. He bypassed years of traditional musical education by ruthlessly applying the principles of rapid skill acquisition.
He applied the same framework to a completely different challenge, learning how to play the ancient board game of Go. Go is notoriously complex, far more expensive than chess, and heavily reliant on pattern recognition and intuition. Again, he started by defining his target. He wanted to be able to play a full game against an actual opponent without making completely embarrassing beginner mistakes. He jumped in over his head, exposing himself to the intimidating terminology of the game. He identified mental models, understanding the concepts of liberties and eyes, which govern how pieces are captured and territories are secured. He utilized fast feedback loops by playing against a computer program that instantly showed him why his moves were weak. He studied the most common foundational opening patterns, deconstructing the massive game into smaller, recognizable sequences. Within 20 hours of focused study and practice, he was able to hold his own in casual matches and genuinely appreciate the deep strategy of the game, a feat that usually takes casual players months to achieve.
The underlying truth of the first 20 hours is incredibly liberating. The world is full of fascinating skills, hobbies, and professional abilities that are completely within your reach. You do not need innate talent, and you do not need 10,000 hours of free time. You just need a system, a little bit of discipline, and the courage to look foolish for a very short period. The frustration barrier is a paper tiger. It looks terrifying, but the moment you commit to pushing through it, it completely dissolves. So I want you to think about that one thing you have always wanted to learn. Maybe it is coding, maybe it is a language, maybe it is painting or photography. Write it down right now. Break it into its smallest pieces, grab a 20-minute timer, and just start. The only thing standing between you and a brand new skill is 20 hours of focused effort. Your 20 hours starts now.